Travis knew that if he could get enough people using the Uber app, they'd see it was a better way to travel, and at that point, the authorities wouldn't be able to shut them down without facing huge public backlash. But they had to move quickly. So, Uber struck a deal with AT&T to buy thousands of iPhones in bulk at a discounted price. They would then hand these out to drivers pre-programmed to run Uber's software. They also offered them cash bonuses for completing a certain number of trips per week. This immediately brought lots of new drivers onto their network very quickly. Then, to get riders, Uber offered to give away the first trip completely free. After all, who wouldn't want a free taxi ride? Uber would then give the second and third trip away at a discounted price to encourage them to use the service again, believing that if someone had tried it a few times, they'd see the value and be willing to pay full price in future. This strategy was incredibly expensive, since the company lost money on every ride. But it paid off. Because soon many people started exclusively using Uber instead of normal taxis. And then Uber began expanding into other cities by replicating this same strategy, offering generous promotions up front along with referral bonuses, so the app became popular very quickly, meaning that by the time the city's authorities started questioning what Uber was doing and whether it was even allowed, they already had a loyal, active user base. Then, whenever local authorities threatened them, Uber would send out alerts to users on the app with a button to easily sign a petition supporting Uber, or even a button to email their local representatives to express their support for Uber, using a pre-filled email template. Whenever Uber sent out these alerts via their app, local councils and regulators would soon find their inboxes flooded with people saying they support Uber and don't want it to be shut down. Uber would also organize protests outside City Hall and ask users of the app to come and make their voices heard. Although, in one particular protest in New York, not many Uber users showed up to support them. So, Uber just told all their employees from one of their offices to go and protest instead. The local authorities didn't realize that most of the support was coming from paid Uber employees. But in Travis's view, Uber wasn't doing anything wrong. He said, "There's been so much corruption and cronyism within the taxi industry, where corrupt taxi cartels pay corrupt politicians to protect them. So if you ask for permission up front, you'll never get it." He believed Uber was better for both riders and drivers, but that there was no way they could win by playing by the rules. So he completely ignored them. However, in 2012, the battle between Uber and regulators became much more fierce, when Uber launched a new service called UberX, which allowed almost anyone to be a driver for the company, which opened up all kinds of new legal issues. And by this point, city officials had already realized that Uber wasn't very cooperative, so they instead threatened drivers, and essentially said, if we catch anyone driving for Uber, we'll fine you, clamp your cars, and tow them away. The idea was to scare people to stop them from using the app, so that Uber would never gain any momentum. But Travis and Uber were already several moves ahead. Firstly, they regularly sent out notices on the app, saying that any fines or fees incurred whilst driving for Uber would be fully reimbursed. Travis viewed these as just another business expense. But the real genius was that Uber developed a secret system so that local cities wouldn't catch them, and it was called Greyball. Travis knew the authorities would download the Uber app themselves so they could track the cars within the app. However, Uber developed a software to detect when police, regulators, or local council members tried to join the app. And then they would greyball them, which is effectively like shadow banning. If you get greyballed, you can still open the app, but it looks like there are no cars driving on the map. And if you try to order a ride, it just tells you there's no drivers nearby. Whereas if you viewed Uber with a normal non-greyballed account, you'd see that really there were loads of nearby drivers. Now, how did Uber know who to greyball? Well, firstly they used location data, and if you downloaded or used Uber from certain areas, like a police station or government offices, you'd get flagged. Uber could then check the personal data of that account, including things like their credit card information, and cross-reference that with social media to check if it was a real user trying to use the app, or if it was someone associated with a government agency or law enforcement, or anyone who might be trying to shut Uber down. The Greyball software also detected suspicious activity, like someone opening and closing the app lots of times without ordering a ride. Uber even recruited ex-CIA, NSA, and FBI employees to help them improve the Greyball software, as well as to spy on local government officials and track where they went. Essentially, Uber built their own corporate espionage team. And it worked. There are countless stories of authorities ordering an Uber, hoping to catch the Uber driver in the act and fine them for breaking the rules. But instead, suddenly their order would get cancelled, as supposedly there were no Uber drivers using the app. The authorities just thought that people were following their warnings and not driving for Uber, when in reality, they were seeing a fake map with all the cars hidden, because they'd been greyballed. So, they had no chance of catching Uber or its drivers. Of course, Uber kept this operation highly secret. In fact, it wasn't until 2017 when an investigation discovered that Uber had been invading local authorities for years by using these systems.
Digital equivalent of that sort of greed is good mentality, the Gordon Gekko kind of mentality, which is we will do this, we can do this, and no one's going to stop us.
Uber also spent vast sums of money on lobbying governments to legalize their service. So, by the time that Uber's secret Greyball operation was discovered, and people realized the deceptive practices they'd been using, Uber were already up and running legally in most major cities, and was too popular to shut down, just like Travis had planned all along. Once Uber had support and leverage in a city, it's reported that they treated negotiations with local authorities like hostage situations. Basically, once Uber knew they had the power and the public support, they used that to get legislation changed to accommodate their business model, such as changing the laws about contract workers so that Uber didn't have to give drivers full employment benefits. Of course, Uber's battles would never really stop. Even to this day, just look at Uber in the news right now, and you'll see people protesting Uber and some cities banning it altogether. But in those early years, Uber devised a systematic playbook for evading the rules and outwitting the local authorities, and that's what allowed them to expand so rapidly. The only problem was that an even bigger battle was just beginning.